Come with me. The rich cowboy came to collect her father's debt, but he took her hand instead. Dust Hollow, Arizona Territory, spring of 1817. The wind dragged dry heat across the dirt, rattling the cracked window panes of the shack, squatting at the edge of town. The sun hung low, casting long, fractured shadows across the porch where broken tools lay forgotten. Inside, the stench of sweat, whiskey, and neglect lingered like a ghost no one had dared to banish. Vincent Vaughn dismounted in silence, dust brushing off his boots as he stepped toward the shack. He wore no spurs today. He did not need the sound of warning. The man inside already knew why he was coming. He knocked once. The door creaked open before he could knock again. "What the hell do you want?" growled James Hartley, shoulders hunched beneath a torn flannel shirt. His face was carved by time, drink, and fury that never quite faded. Vincent spoke without raising his voice. "It has been 6 months. I came for what you owe." Hartley scoffed, spat on the floor beside Vincent's boots. "I do not have it. That is not my concern. I said I do not have it." Hartley snapped, swaying slightly. "What do you want me to do? Bleed silver? The mines dried up. The fields are dead. You knew that when you lent me the money." Vincent's jaw tightened. He did not speak. Hartley's eyes narrowed, then darted over his shoulder. A mean sort of grin curled on his lips. Wait here, he staggered inside. A moment passed, then another. Vincent remained still, the heat pressing into his spine, the silence of the shack louder than most storms. The door opened again, this time wider. Hartley shoved a girl into the sunlight by the shoulder. She stumbled but caught herself before she fell. She was no child, barefoot, with tangled dark hair, and a faded green dress worn too thin. Yet she stood tall as any woman could after being dragged like a lamb to slaughter. "This one," Hartley said, gesturing toward her with a careless thumb. "Useless as a wife, useless as a daughter. Maybe she can be useful to you." Vincent's eyes did not flinch, but they turned sharply toward the girl. "She's 18. Hartley went on, grinning now. "You got land, money, a little girl that needs raising, and no woman to warm your bed. Take her. Call it even." Melissa's breath caught. She looked at her father as if seeing a stranger. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. Hartley's grin disappeared. "I fed you, I raised you, and for what? You cannot even scrub a floor without whining. Do something for once in your miserable life." "No," Melissa said, voice firmer. "I am not for sale." She turned away, but too slow. The slap cracked through the dry air, loud as thunder. She fell to the porch floor, her cheek blooming red, hair falling over her eyes. "You ungrateful brat," Hartley spat. "You're nothing but dead weight." Silence followed. Vincent did not speak. He stepped forward. Hartley turned, perhaps to throw another insult, but froze when he saw the look in Vincent's eyes, like frost meeting fire. Vincent walked past the old man, bent down, and offered Melissa his hand. She looked up, dazed, but not crying. Her lips trembled, but her pride held. Vincent's voice was low, but clear. "Come with me." Not an offer, not a question, a decision. Melissa stared at his hand, then at his face. For the first time in years, someone had not turned away from her. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The first time Melissa saw Maddox's ranch, it felt more like a town than a home. Rows of barns and bunkhouses stretched across acres of dry earth and wild grass. Horses stamped in dusty corral, and men moved like clockwork, shouting orders and sharpening tools beneath the broad sweep of sky. Vincent said little as he helped her down from the wagon. His hand brushed hers only briefly, steady, firm, then gone. He pointed to a narrow structure tucked beside the stables. "That's your room." She nodded. clutching her bundle of belongings and stepping inside. The space smelled faintly of hay and damp wood, a narrow cot, a rusted wash basin, and a single cracked window. The blanket was thin, the floor was dirt, no warmth, no welcome. Just enough space to breathe and nothing more. It was clear this wasn't kindness, it was toleration. As she unpacked, she caught sight of a little girl peeking around the stable door. Pale curls, big solemn eyes. Ella, Vincent's daughter. She watched Melissa silently, arms tucked behind her back like a ghost, unsure if it was allowed to speak. Melissa offered a small wave. Ella vanished without a word. By the second day, the whispers began. Melissa passed the bunkhouse carrying a basket of linens. When she heard the first voice, low cutting, "Dead girl's got some hips on her, huh?" Then another, "Wonder what she's paying him with." Laughter followed. Boyd, thick, necked and always smelling of cheap whiskey, leaned against a post with two other men beside him. He tilted his head toward Melissa and smirked. "Reckon the boss got tired of sleeping alone." Melissa didn't flinch. She kept walking. She scrubbed floors, hauled buckets, washed Ella's sheets, and cleaned the main house in silence. She cooked when asked, waited when not, and when Ella dropped her cup or spilled her milk, Melissa only smiled and wiped it away without a word. Ella at first watched her with suspicion, then curiosity, then sometimes admiration. But the others, they only pressed harder. By the end of the week, the teasing turned to touch. It was midday, the sun harsh overhead. Melissa made her way to the well with an empty pail, her apron dusted with flour. As she reached for the rope, Boyd stepped into her path. "Well now," he said, eyes raking over her, "you sure know how to carry a bucket." Melissa said nothing. She tried to step around him. He blocked her. "You don't talk much, do you?" His breath reeked. "Makes a man wonder what else you're quiet about." He reached out, his fingers brushing the inside of her wrist. She pulled back quickly, too quickly. The bucket slipped and clanged against the stones. She bent to pick it up, heart hammering. Boyd stepped forward and planted his boot on the edge of her skirt. "Oops," he muttered. She tried to rise. He gave her a nudge with his foot, not enough to hurt, but enough to humiliate. She fell to her knees in the dirt, and then "Get your boot off her skirt now." The voice cut like a blade through silence. Boyd froze. Melissa, still on her knees, looked up to see Vincent standing just a few feet away, one arm around Ella, his jaw set in stone. No one had heard him arrive. No one had noticed him watching. Vincent set his daughter down slowly. He walked to Boyd without a word, drew back and punched him square in the face. The man collapsed, groaning in the dust. Vincent looked around at the others. "Anyone else want to test where I draw the line?" Silence. He turned to Melissa. She hadn't moved, eyes wide, unsure if what she saw was real. Vincent offered his hand. She took it. As he pulled her to her feet, his voice dropped to something only she could hear. "If anyone makes you feel unsafe, including me, you tell me. This is your home now." Melissa blinked fast, the weight of those words pressing against something fragile inside her. Behind them, Ella stepped forward. Her small fingers slipped into Melissa's. "Papa," she whispered. "Is she staying with us?" Vincent looked at Melissa long and full, like a question and an answer at once. He nodded. From that day on, no one touched her. No one whispered. Melissa worked as before, but now there was a softness in her step, a smile that appeared when Ella trailed flour across the kitchen floor, a quiet laugh when the dog stole bread from the table, and every night from the window of the main house, Vincent watched through the glass. The woman once offered like coin had become the only thing keeping the home from falling silent. Rain had fallen hard the night before, unexpected and bitterly cold. The kind of storm that soaked through every layer, and left the ground muddy and the air heavy with the scent of pine and wet dust. Melissa had stayed out longer than she should have, hauling firewood from the eastern fence line after the delivery boy failed to show. By the time she returned, her dress clung to her skin and her lips had turned pale. She said nothing to anyone, just changed, quietly made dinner, and went to bed. By morning, she could barely sit up. Her forehead burned, her breath shallow and uneven. The room spun when she opened her eyes. She curled under the thin blanket, trying to will the fever away. Outside, the ranch stirred to life. But not far from the kitchen, a small figure tiptoed across the hall. Ella clutched a metal cup of water in both hands, careful not to spill. Her little feet were bare against the wooden floor. She paused at the threshold of Melissa's room, hesitated, then stepped inside. "Miss Melissa," she whispered. No answer. Melissa stirred slightly, her brow furrowed, lashes damp. Ella walked to the side of the bed and set the water down. She reached for the edge of the blanket and pulled it up higher over Melissa's shoulder. Then, with the gentlest motion a 4-year-old could manage, she climbed into the narrow cot beside her. Melissa blinked once slowly. Her voice was Ella. "You're sick," the girl said simply. Melissa smiled faintly, barely able to lift her hand. Ella took it. "I will keep you warm," she said. Outside, the wind rattled a loose shoot at her. Inside, warmth bloomed in silence. Minutes later, the door creaked open. Vincent stepped in, a leather pouch of medicine in one hand, a folded cloth in the other. He paused at the doorway, breath caught halfway in his chest. There, in the dim morning light, lay his daughter curled up beside the woman he had brought here, like a transaction, not for love, not for companionship, just to settle a debt. But now Ella's small hand rested on Melissa's wrist, her head on Melissa's shoulder. The fevered woman held her gently, protectively, even in sleep. Vincent said nothing. He walked over and placed the pouch on the table, careful not to disturb them. He stood for a long while, eyes tracing the soft lines of Melissa's face, the curve of her fingers as they rested near Ella's back. He had not seen his daughter sleep like that since her mother died. And the woman who brought that peace, she had no reason to, no obligation, just a quiet, persistent tenderness that asked for nothing in return. He swallowed the lump in his throat. As he turned to leave, Ella stirred, blinking up at him. "Papa," she whispered. Vincent knelt beside the bed. "Yes, sweetheart. She is staying right." He reached out, brushed a damp curl from her cheek. "She's staying," he whispered, "no matter what." The late afternoon sun cast long amber shadows through the kitchen windows. Melissa sat on the floor near the hearth, a pile of peeled apples in her lap, her movement slow but steady. Ella sat cross-legged beside her, fiddling with a piece of yarn, her tiny fingers tangling it into a loose braid. They had grown close in unspoken ways, through shared glances, silent comforts, and soft laughter over spilled milk or crooked stitches. This afternoon felt no different until Melissa, without thinking, broke the silence with a voice too low for storytelling, too heavy for childhood. "My mama used to braid my hair like that." Ella looked up. "Where is she now?" Melissa hesitated. Her hands paused. The knife hovered above the last apple. "She's gone like my mama." Melissa nodded, but mine did not get sick. She was taken. Ella's eyes, too wise for her years, stayed on Melissa's face. "My father hit her," Melissa said. Her voice was barely above a breath. She stepped between him and me once. He was angry, drunk and angry. Said I spoke out of turn. She swallowed hard. She never stood again after that night. Ella reached out and gently placed her hand over Melissa's. The knife was still now, resting quietly on the wooden board. "I'm sorry," the little girl whispered. Melissa smiled, but it broke unevenly. I learned that pain yells loud, but silence can kill. Neither of them noticed the shadow standing just outside the door. Vincent leaned against the frame, arms folded, jaw clenched. He had come to ask about supper. Instead, he had heard something that would not leave him. Later that evening, thunder rumbled in the distance, dry and far off. The sky held the promise of a storm, but it was not the weather that shifted the air in the house. A knock came at the main door. Vincent opened it to find James Hardley on the porch, clothes still stained with last week's dust, a toothpick between his lips, and something smug in his eyes. "You have something of mine," he said. Vincent did not blink. "You lost your debt." Hartley chuckled. "I ain't talking about money. I'm talking about my girl." Vincent's fingers tightened on the door frame. "There's a man in Dry Creek," Hartley went on. "Owns a feed store, no teeth but plenty of money, said he'll marry her. Wants someone quiet, simple, pretty enough. Melissa is not for trade. Oh, come on, you had your time to play house with her. Now let her do something useful." A sharp intake of breath came from behind Vincent. Melissa stood in the hallway barefoot, hands trembling. She looked at her father, not with fear this time, but something heavier, disgust, resolve. "I will not go," she said. Hartley scoffed. "Girl, you do what I say, always have." "No," she whispered. And then she dropped to her knees beside Vincent, eyes burning with desperation. "Please," she said, "do not let him take me. I would rather die here on this land in this house than be sold again." Hartley laughed. "Look at that. Still dramatic as ever." But Vincent no longer looked at him. He looked down at Melissa, then gently helped her to her feet. He turned to face Hartley. "She belongs here now," Vincent said, voice like cold iron. "Not to you. Not to anyone else." For the first time, Hartley looked uncertain. Vincent stepped forward, forcing the older man back onto the porch. "You come again," Vincent warned, "and I will not be civil." He shut the door behind him. Melissa stood silent, hands clenched at her sides. Vincent met her gaze, then nodded once. "You're safe," he said, and for the first time she believed it. The wind howled that night like a wounded animal carrying with it the dry scent of cedar and something acrid smoke. It started just after midnight, a spark maybe from an untended lantern or a careless ember drifting from the blacksmith's forge, no one knew. But by the time the flames began licking the walls of the old supply barn, most of the ranch was still fast asleep. Melissa was not. She had risen early to fetch extra blankets, something in the wind pulling at her nerves. That was when she saw it. Orange flicker curling up the edge of the barn roof, small but growing fast, and inside she knew Ella sometimes crept there, curling up in the hoft with a book or just to escape. Melissa did not think. She ran. The doors were warm to the touch, creaking as she forced them open. The smoke curled into her throat, sharp and bitter, but she saw the tiny shape in the hay, just as a beam cracked above. "Ella!" she shouted, coughing hard. The child stirred, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Melissa fought through the smoke, scooping the girl into her arms and bolting back through the haze as the fire roared behind them. The hem of her dress caught briefly, flames searing up her side before she rolled onto the dirt outside, shielding Ella beneath her. They lay there gasping, Melissa's skin blistering, Ella clinging to her like roots to soil. By the time the alarm was raised, the barn was lost. Flames ate through wood and rope, casting eerie shadows across the ranch. Vincent was out, riding fence miles away when he saw the glow on the horizon. He spurred his horse hard, heart in his throat. He had seen fire before, but never from his own land, never near his child. He reached the ranch wild-eyed, breath ragged. The barn was smoldering, the crew dousing the last flames. He leapt from the saddle, shouting, "Ella, she's safe." One of the hands called. Melissa pulled her out. He turned toward the house. Inside, Ella sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, thumb in her mouth. Vincent fell to his knees in front of her and pulled her close, eyes squeezed shut. Then he saw the burns, not on Ella, on Melissa. Her forearm was wrapped in a damp cloth, the sleeve torn, raw skin underneath glowing angry red. "You're hurt," he said, voice too soft to be his. "It is nothing," she whispered. "She is safe." He said nothing more, only took her hand and led her gently to the kitchen. He washed her burn with cool water, the silence between them heavier than pain. His hands were steady at first until she winced. Then they trembled, she noticed. "You do not have to." "I do," he said simply. He wrapped the clean cloth around her arm, fingers brushing the tender skin. Beneath, the fire crackled softly in the hearth. They sat there afterward, both exhausted, facing the flames that now burned safely behind brick. Melissa glanced at him, voice barely a breath. "Why do you not touch me?" Vincent looked over startled. "You could have," she said. "That first night or the next, you could have, but you did not." He met her gaze fully now, the first time. No hesitation, no shield. "Because," he said, "if I touch you, I will not be able to stop." She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply looked at him, and in her eyes was something unspoken, something aching and old and familiar. Two souls who had wandered too long, who had stopped believing in warmth. But in that firelight, they saw it in each other. The morning was too quiet. Melissa felt it in her bones before she heard the knock. There was no clang of tools, no calls from the stable hands, not even the rustle of wind through the dry grass. Just stillness, unnatural, pressing, foreboding. Vincent opened the door to find two men standing outside, one short and stout, dressed in fine city clothes that looked out of place against the dust, and the other taller, older, with the bitter scowl she had grown up fearing. "James Hartley ought someone to see the girl," Hartley announced, stepping past Vincent like he owned the air between them. "This here's Mr. Bernard Whitlock. Owns half the freight wagon running through Prescott." Whitlock tipped his hat politely, his eyes lingering too long on Melissa as she came to the doorway. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. His gaze wasn't cruel, but it was cold, measuring. "I heard you're looking for stability, miss," the man said. "Your father tells me you're of age, hardworking, quiet. I run a clean house. You'd have servants, a new dress every week. I'd take care of the debt, no questions asked." Melissa didn't move. Vincent's jaw tensed. He said nothing. He stood beside her, unmoving, unreadable, but his stillness was thunderous. Hartley stepped forward, voice oily. "Girl, this is a blessing. Man like him, don't come knocking for just anyone. You think this offer is going to come again." Melissa looked at her father, his face full of expectation, but none of love. Then at Whitlock, whose smile never reached his eyes. Finally, she turned to Vincent, but he didn't speak. His arms were crossed, his stare fixed on the floor. As if surrendering the choice to her, but not without pain. She saw it. Melissa stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but each word struck with the weight of truth. "I do not want a new dress," she said. "I do not want servants or promises or debts paid by someone who does not know me." Whitlock's brows rose. "You'd rather scrub floors and feed pigs. I would rather feel seen." She turned to Hartley, then back to Vincent. "I have known what it means to be unwanted, to be used, to be spoken for, but never heard." But here her voice broke, then steadied. "I have been looked at not as a burden or as a bargain, but with kindness, with eyes that did not pity me." She stepped back inside and gently closed the door. Partly cursed on the porch, Whitlock left without a word. Vincent remained silent. He looked at Melissa only once, then walked out the back door. The sky was turning copper over the hills. Melissa stood frozen for a moment before panic took her limbs. She ran across the yard, past the garden to the stables where she found him tightening the saddle straps on his horse, his back to her, breath heavy. "Vincent," she called. He did not turn. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him, pressing her cheek to his back. "Do not go," she said, voice trembling. "Please, if you walk away now, I will not have any home left." He turned slowly, his hands resting at her waist. Their eyes met, tired, raw, but full. "I did not know if he would choose me," he whispered. "I just did. The weekly market in Dust Hollow had never seen a crowd this thick. Sunlight danced off tin signs and horses snorted at their reins. Men leaned against posts chewing tobacco. Women bartered over fabric, and children chased chickens through the dust. But when Vincent Vaughn stepped onto the porch of the old town hall, all movement seemed to hush. He stood tall, a man rarely seen in town unless it was for supplies or business. Today, though, there was something different in his posture, a finality, a quiet thunder. Melissa stood nearby, uncertain, her fingers twisting the hem of her apron. Ella clung to her side, staring up with wide eyes. Vincent cleared his throat, his voice firm but calm. "I want to speak to everyone here," he began, "not just as a landowner, but as a man who's watched enough silence do damage." People turned, heads tilted. Whispers passed through the crowd. Vincent took a slow breath. "Months ago, James Hartley came to me with a debt he could not repay. What he offered in return was not land nor cattle, but his daughter." A low murmur swept through the crowd. Shock, judgment, curiosity. "She came to my home not as a guest," he continued, "but as property handed over like coin. I took her in because I could not stomach what was done to her. I gave her a place to sleep, work to do, but she gave back more than I ever asked." His eyes found Melissa. "She gave my daughter back her laughter. She gave the house a soul." Again, he turned to the crowd, voice sharpening. "Let it be known here now. James Hartley's debt is erased. The land he borrowed against will not be claimed. I want nothing from that man." Gasps rose. "But more importantly," he said louder now, "Melissa Hartley owes me nothing. She is not a servant, not a kept woman, not a bargaining chip. She is not mine to own, but she is, if she chooses, part of my family." Silence, then a murmur, then the start of something louder. Opinion rising like wildfire. But before the voices could overtake the air, a smaller one cut through. "Please stay with us, Ella." She had stepped forward, clutching Melissa's hand with both of her own, her little face turned up, eyes shining. Melissa stared at her, this tiny girl who had once refused to speak, who had buried her joy deep inside, and now she was offering her heart. Tears welled in Melissa's eyes, and then without being asked, she stepped forward to face the town. The same people who once whispered behind their hands, who judged her silence, her past, her presence beside a wealthy widower. Her voice trembled at first, but she steadied it with every word. "All my life," she said, "I have been spoken for, passed around like a thing to be used or dismissed. I have been the shame of my father, the talk of your porches, the girl no one wanted." She paused. Some looked away. Others met her gaze, guilt flickering behind their curiosity. "But not here," she went on, "not with him, not with this little girl." Her hand gently squeezed Ella's. "I was not chosen before, but today I choose." She turned. "Vincent and I choose to stay." The wind carried her words like an oath, soft and undeniable. Vincent's eyes burned not from pride, but from the weight of everything unsaid between them. The crowd did not cheer, they did not need to. Respect hung in the air thicker than noise. For the first time, Melissa Hartley was not someone's burden, nor someone's bargain. She was her own, and she had chosen where she belonged. The evening air was thick with silence, the kind that came before hard decisions or soft goodbyes. The sun stretched low behind the hills, casting the ranch in golden light, its edges painted in orange and rust. A breeze swept gently across the porch, rustling the edge of a worn blanket draped over a chair, carrying the faint scent of cedarwood and home. Melissa stood by the wagon, her hands carefully folding the last of her clothes into a modest burlap bag. Her fingers paused on a ribbon, Ella's forgotten in the laundry, and she held it for a moment longer than she meant to. She had not said goodbye, not yet, but the stillness around the house told her he already knew. Inside, Ella sat on the floor with her stuffed horse, quiet and unusually still, and just beyond the porch steps stood Vincent, one hand resting gently on the head of their old cattle dog, the other hanging loosely at his side. He watched her, watched the way her back curved inward when she hesitated, Watched the way her hands shook when they folded something that held memory. Watched everything and said nothing until he did. "Come with me." Melissa froze, her back still turned. The words were not loud, not desperate, just steady, like a river cutting stone. She turned slowly. He was closer now, just a few paces away, the dying sunlight catching the edge of his jaw, creases near his eyes. She searched his face for answers or permission or maybe something she could name. His voice was soft, "Not to pay a debt. Not because I need a mother for my daughter. Not because the town's talking." He took a breath. "But because you fit here. Because when you laugh, the house breathes easier. Because when you touch her hair, she sleeps through the night. And because when you are near me, I feel like something I lost a long time ago has found its way back." Melissa's eyes blurred. She pressed a hand to her chest. "I do not have anything," she whispered. Vincent stepped forward, shaking his head once. "You have everything." Stillness again, and then movement. She dropped the ribbon into the bag and let the rest fall. The wind picked up her skirt as she walked toward him, slow but sure, like crossing a bridge made of something invisible but unbreakable. She stopped inches from him. "Say it again," she whispered. He smiled, almost sad. "Come with me." She nodded. "I was waiting." Vincent reached for her hand, fingers lacing through hers. From the doorway, Ella peeked out, her tiny face alight with something more than hope. "Are we going now?" she called, already stepping barefoot into the grass. Melissa laughed softly, tears streaking her cheeks like morning dew. "Yes, baby," she said, her voice trembling. "We are." They walked together, man, woman, child, and dog, across the field that caught the last golden kiss of the Sunday. Vincent's hand never left hers, and as they crested the rise where sky met earth, Ella turned back, beaming. "Mama," she shouted, "come on." Melissa's breath hitched. She looked at Vincent, who gave her a small, knowing nod. She squeezed his hand once firmly, and then they kept walking toward a life not owed, not borrowed, but chosen. Thank you for riding with us through this heartfelt journey of love, redemption, and quiet courage on the untamed frontier. If Melissa and Vincent's story moved you, if Ella's small voice tugged at your heart, and if you believe love can rise even from ash and debt, then don't forget to hit that like button, smash the subscribe, and join us here at Wild West Love Stories. We bring you legendary tales of forbidden romance, fierce devotion, and timeless connection from the dusty trails of the American West, where bullets missed but hearts didn't. Until the next story, partner, ride true.